survey research for you guys, we did survey research on them as well. And what they're looking at is they were asked, rate on a level, a scale of 1 to 5, how important you see each of these things. Now, what I've done, and what you'll see throughout the day, is we'll highlight the low score and the high score on these answers. So what did they find the least important, and what did they find the most important in the survey results? Okay, so take a look at what their answers are. How important are each of the following to you in terms of recruitment? The lowest score, the least important thing, is the proximity to the highest potential individuals in the organization. Now, I'll go back to the recruiting example I mentioned at the beginning, Xerox. Now, Bertie did a fantastic job of putting people in the room. The one thing that they overvalued, they've since now corrected, is Bernie and a lot of other organizations across the country like to bring V-level and C-level executives to recruiting conferences or recruiting opportunities or events on campus, because historically, our generation is impressed by that. This generation is not at all impressed by your title. The same things that we love about them as far as them not stereotyping, not caring about race, not caring about background, those things that make them so fantastic also make them not impressed by your title. They're impressed by what you can deliver. They're impressed by how you want to talk to them, how you want to engage, but they don't care. It's like Adam Circles over there a minute ago. They don't care if you're down here or you're down here. If you know your stuff, they respect you. If you don't know your stuff, or you know stuff from 30 years ago, they don't respect you. So proximity of a high-ranking person is not a big deal to them. The good news is the gospel for all the recruiters in the room is if you go to an event, you don't have to take a high-level person out of their job that costs a lot of money when a high-level person's out of their job for a day to a recruiting conference, because nobody's impressed anyway. They don't need to see the CEO of the firm. We'll talk more about it, but one of the essences of this generation is they do not have the same sense of power distance that mine did or boomers did. They're cool talking to anybody, but they're not impressed just because you're supposed to be somebody. So, number one is they're not impressed by bringing these high-level folks. But watch what they are impressed by. And this goes back to your answer. We're going to go again. Watch what they are most impressed about. The number one thing, most important thing in the recruiting process, the single most important thing in the recruiting process to thousands of millennials who have been surveyed, is making good first impressions. Now, here is the interesting part about that answer. They don't mean them. They mean you making a good first impression on them. Y'all hear me? They don't mean that they think they got to make a good first impression. That's important. They mean that you have to make a good first impression on them, or they're outies. Now, if we stop and go home right now, we preach to death. Right now, you know. Right now, you know already that they don't care about bringing a high-level person in, but the first thing out of your mouth, the brand on the front of your booth, or whatever recruiting context you're in, the first thing they see, the first person they talk to, better be the right one. They better be seeing something tight, and they better be talking to somebody who absolutely makes a good first impression. We're going to find later on, I don't want to give too much away, but later on in the day we're talking about selling to millennials. When they're being sold to, they want immediate expertise to be shown. They don't like rapport being built traditional rapport ways. Hey, how was the ball game last week? Whatever. They want to know what you know right out of the gate. Same thing with recruiting. Prove to me right out of the gate that you are an expert, you know what you're doing, or I'll go talk to somebody else because there's 18 companies chasing me. So this idea of making this good first impression is so key. So we take this and we look at it and we say to ourselves, how are we going to get even better at recruiting these millennials? Throughout the day, you're going to see us do a purpose statement for each one of these types of activities, recruiting or training or selling to, and then 5 difference makers. 5 things you can do starting tomorrow that might help you get better even better than you are at recruiting. The important thing to think about when we're recruiting this generation is the purpose of recruiting millennials. What makes recruiting this generation different is that we can improve